So welcome, everyone. My name is Anherad Lang. I'm the Executive Director of PHAP, that's short for the International Association of Professionals in Humanitarian Assistance and Protection, and I'll be serving as your host today. This is the third session in a series of events that UNHCR is organizing together with PHAP on how cities are taking action to ensure that they are inclusive for refugees and other vulnerable groups, with a special focus on the situation during COVID-19. Today's event, co-organized with UCLG Africa, will be focusing in on South Africa. And before we get started, I'd like to share a few technical notes regarding the web platform. First, if you encounter any technical issues with the platform, we are providing video backup live stream as well as audio only live stream at the URLs shown on your screen. And you should have received those as well in your connection instructions email. My colleague will also share these links in the chat should you need them. Interpretation is available in Arabic, English, and French. Please select your preferred language using the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. There are also English closed captions for increased accessibility. To enable them, click on the CC button and then choose Show Subtitle. To submit questions for the speakers or comments throughout the session, please use either the chat or the Q&A button, and note that you do have the option to submit your question anonymously if you use the Q&A function. If you're following the live stream, you can type your questions or comments into the chat there. You can also send in comments or questions via Twitter using the hashtag #InclusiveCities. So with that, I'd like to introduce the moderator for today's session. Anselar Mangena Nombewu is an award-winning South African journalist who has been reporting for Forbes Africa, BBC World News, and others. Outside of her work as a journalist, Anselar is a United Nations Refugee Agency ambassador and a PR entrepreneur. Welcome, Anselar. Great to have you. The floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you so very much for introducing me, and welcome once more to everyone who is watching this so important conversation that we are having this morning. I would like to say that please keep those questions coming, because the idea and the point of this event today is to understand and figure out how we can have more inclusive cities and how different organizations can work together with cities to ensure that refugees and the internally displaced people are well taken care of. We know that 2020 has been a very difficult year for many because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our economies are struggling. There is high job losses. Most businesses are losing money. People have died and continue to. So the refugees that we have within our communities need us now more than ever. We know that there is more people within the cities around the world than there are in rural areas. It's actually estimated that 90% of people live within urban cities like Durban. So thank you so very much to the city of Durban for taking up this initiative and pledging towards this so important role. Before we dive right into the actual discussion, I would like us to hear from Mr. Valentin Topsiba, who's the Director, Southern Africa Bureau at the UNHCR, who's going to give us a few words. Mr. Valentin?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ansila, for your introductory remarks. A warm welcome to everyone, and thank you for joining this discussion today. The Global Compact on Refugees lays out the crucial role of authorities as first responders and outlines the significant impact local authorities can have as first responders. More than 61% of the world refugee population now lives in an urban environment. Asylum seekers, refugees, internally displaced, and stateless persons can be especially vulnerable to COVID-19 related health risks because they live in overcrowded settings. They need practical and non-discriminatory access to information and to adequate medical care. Mayors, city administrations and local authorities and their local partners are some of the most important stakeholders in the delivery of protection and assistance in urban spaces. We look forward to hearing from our partner, eThekwini Municipality, represented by Mr. Eric Alpegrin, about the effort Durban is making to ensure that all residents have access to the information, healthcare, direct services, regardless of the language they speak or their immigration status. It is also so important to have Councillor Justa Sidel, South African Local Government Association, here with us today, representing United Cities and local governments. The Global Compact on Refugees calls on city networks to share good practices and innovative approaches, and we know we can learn from their experience. Cities, with the support of United Cities and local governments, mark out a space for themselves at the first Global Refugee Forum held in Geneva in December 2019. UNHCR welcomed concrete pledges from Bristol, United Kingdom, Milan, Italy, Sao Paulo, Brazil, Strasbourg, France, and Durban, South Africa. Many cities have taken the initiative to strengthen their responses by developing pragmatic solutions to the challenges of serving refugees in this time of COVID-19, often without the required additional resources needed, translating the Global Compact on Refugees into action, into reality. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Valentin, for those opening remarks. Now, before we delve into the conversation itself, I would like to give our esteemed panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves briefly in the context of this conversation. We'll start with Mr. Eric Appelgren, who is the Head of International and Governance Relations of eThekwini Municipality, followed by Mr. Leonard Zulu from UNHCR Southern Africa, and Mr. Daniel Bimyangu, who is an Executive Director, Africa Solidarity Network, and finally Fatima Fernandez, from who is a Policy Advisor from UCLG. You can introduce yourselves in that order. Can Mr. Leonard Zulu do an introductory remark?
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, panelists. I'm very pleased to be a part of this panel today. My name is Leonard Zulu. I am the South Africa representation for UNHCR representative. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Mr. Daniel?
Good morning to everyone. My name is Daniel Byamungu and my surname is Dunia. I'm the Executive Director of the African Solidarity Network. We are based in Durban at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, but also I'm a social cohesion advocate for the Department of Art and Culture, National Department of Art and Culture. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And finally, Fatima.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Fatima Fernandez, and as a policy officer at United Cities and Local Governments, I focus on migration and asylum. And just a quick snapshot, United Cities and Local Governments is the largest network of local and regional governments that represents and defends their interests at the international level. Happy to be here with you today.
Thank you so very much for that. We'll begin our conversation right now. And I would like to mention that our conversation will take place in 3 themes that we want to make sure that we cover today. We want to talk about inclusivity. We want to talk about what the city of eThekwini is doing and their pledge. We want to talk about what refugees themselves are experiencing in the city of eThekwini. And we also want to talk about what we can do to make sure that refugees are safe within the cities that they live in. Daniel, I would like to start with you. You're a refugee yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about your story of how you became a refugee and your experience of living in eThekwini. I think
Sorry.
you're on mute there.
Sorry, I forget to mute myself.
No problem.
Okay. Indeed, I'm a refugee myself. I came in South Africa in 2006. And when I come in South Africa, I present myself to Home Affairs, and which I receive a Section 22 permit. And after that, I receive a Section 24 permit, which is a refugee status. I'm living in Durban since then, up to date. To be a refugee in Durban presents some challenges. And one of them is at arrival. When you arrive, there's a challenge of receiving documentation at the Department of Home Affairs. And the second challenge is the integration within the local communities where we are living. And refugees and asylum seekers, we are considered as criminals, criminals, undocumented, and all those kind of names are given to us. And this Zoom meeting come at the right time where refugees and asylum seekers who are trading in the city of Durban have been removed from their place of work. And the reason of them being removed by the MK veteran is that because they are not South African, they are refugees and they have been ordered to leave the country. And now it's 2 weeks that people are being victim of xenophobic attack in Durban. So to be a refugee in Durban presents quite a lot of challenges, but also we benefiting from the hospitality in Durban, where refugees and asylum seekers, we are having access to healthcare, we have access to education, schools, universities, refugees are receiving grants and so on. So those are some advantage we are having within the city of Durban. Thank you.
How do you think the city itself, Daniel, can help refugees get more involved, especially where COVID-19 is related? What should they be doing?
What the city should be doing, the first thing should start with the integration process. So when refugees and asylum seekers are coming in the country, they need to be integrated within the local community. I mean, refugees need to be taught about the culture of the Zulu people, need to be introduced to the local leadership. And after that, and after the integration process, they need to be what we call be part of the city. So they must contribute in many aspects of the city. Here I'm saying, and the main challenge with the city again is that the city don't have a policy. The city itself don't have policy on migration. So because there's no policy on migration, it's becoming very difficult for city to plan in the way of including refugees and asylum seekers in the city planning. So what we want is the city to have a policy on migration, policy on refugees and asylum seekers, and this policy will inform their way of involving refugees and asylum seekers in city planning.
You know, you're actually touching on a pre-submitted question that I have here from a Mr. Pathias Bongo from Zimbabwe, who says, wanted to ask you this question: to what extent can local communities participate in inclusive city decisions and initiatives, if there is any at all?
Yeah, the local community, see, as I said, there's a need of including refugees and asylum seekers, but also the local people in city planning, which is not happening. In city planning, refugees and asylum seekers are not included.
Daniel, I think your network is freezing. Can you hear us?
I think better to move on, and we'll see if we can get him reconnected.
No problem. Is Eric here yet? You'll let me know if we have him.
Yes, Eric has joined.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Eric. Thank you so very much for joining us. I hope you've caught a bit of the beginning of this conversation. Can you just introduce yourself a little bit to our audience before we delve into a few questions with you?
Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Eric Applegreen. I'm responsible for international and governance relations here in the city of Durban, or more legally known as the eThekwini municipality.
Thank you so very much. You know, the City of Durban pledged to contribute to the implementation of the Global Compact on Refugees to promote the protection, and most importantly for me as an ambassador, because I've seen what happens to refugees, the inclusion of refugees and asylum seekers that we have in the city. Can you tell us a little bit more about this pledge and why you jumped on so early on?
Yeah. I mean, I think the key was that we felt that we need to be more proactive in eradicating the triggers for conflict, and we've identified some of those triggers, and a lot of it's got to do with competition for resources, competition to business opportunity, and also we as a city subscribe to our national constitution and a culture of human rights in the treatment of refugees, because we were refugees once. When we were fighting the horrors of apartheid, we were refugees in exile, so we understand that, but it is a different context right now. And the next point would be to really the need to unite our continent to ensure that conflict is eradicated and work together to defeat the pandemics, eradicate the abuse of migrants by criminal and private sectors, particularly in our society. Because what's happened is that the minority of migrants that are seduced and recruited into criminal gangs and people trafficking, those become the big stories, and it's used to fuel us and them. And particularly when we say them, we're meaning particularly brothers and sisters from our continent in particular. And then really creating a united continent, because I do believe that, I mean, and we're talking close to 100,000 people, you know, it's our city's got a population of 3.9 million. And I don't think another 100,000 people should make a difference. You know, we have the potential and the capacity to integrate, and we have the culture to do it. But I do think that the current triggers, as I said, one, there's been changes in leadership, and I agree with Daniel that we've had very good links with the migrant community leadership and the leadership of the city and the province. But as you're well aware, there's been changes in leadership, and those changes in leadership have been quite messy. It's a result of corruption charges against some of the leaders. It's a result of very serious intra-party conflict. And that conflict has impacted on the way refugees and asylum seekers are treated in the city. But notwithstanding the fact that Daniel has said that we have what I would describe as an incomplete or inconsistent policy environment and regulatory environment as to how to assist, support, and integrate migrants in our society.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned how South Africans were also once refugees during the liberation struggle. And I think it's an important note for us to note in this conversation that most of our grandparents and the people that came before us traveled throughout different parts of the continent. You might think you're South African and your roots are from elsewhere because of the movement that happened. So now seeing that you're being proactive in including refugees and trying to change the narrative of especially the African refugee, do you think that this pledge has helped you combat COVID-19 and help refugees during the COVID-19 crisis?
Not enough. I think it's given us a platform to consider things, but I still think much more needs to be done. And I'll recommend the following. One is the majority of our refugee community members and asylum seekers have been kind of excluded from the social security nets of the food parcels, the unemployment insurance fund, because they didn't qualify. because of our own administrative and statutory system. So we've got to find a way of how do we work with international partners and with our government to see how we can include the refugee communities, particularly when people are out of work. So that's something that was a challenge. And then the issue of the majority of those 100,000 plus people depend on formal and informal economic activities. In particular, the bigger bulk are in the informal economy. And the whole issue of registration and security of people operating in that sector is much, I think we need to do more. I mean, our MKVA people that attacked those traders at the market, the majority of them are not legitimate MK veterans. I mean, some of them are under 40 years old, and there's no way they could have been, because I know all the MK people. I can say for the majority of those people are not MKVA soldiers. They could potentially be relatives or family members. But just to say, and it comes back to my point about changes in leadership, there's been a lot of conflict in the leadership. And that MKVA group is a breakaway group from the legitimately elected and recognized MKVA structure. And that is why my commitment to Daniel and to the ambassador of Senegal was to say, we are working on this, but we are really having difficulty pinning down the real leaders of that group that did that march. So we are still trying to secure, because amongst them, they don't have a legitimate standing, even within the ruling party. So, and the ruling party has distanced itself from this group. So I'm finding it increasingly difficult to secure the real voices of those people, because I also think they are fearful that they might get arrested if they are openly admit that they are the leaders of that march, because it was the action was illegal, what they did. And there is an ongoing investigation. And I've been cooperating with Daniel, because what Daniel's done through the diaspora committee that he's on is basically getting information to me, and we've been making sure that the security cluster of our Metro Police, of our provincial and national police are aware of where the threats are, and proactively try and deal with those threats, both within the market area, the hostels, and in the broader community.
So you've gone a little bit far. I know that you say that there's still a lot that needs to be done, but compared to other cities, at least you've started, because it's about starting and then moving forward with direction. Is there any kind of advice that you can give to cities who are trying or looking to replicate this process?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really building the capacity of your leadership to understand and deal with these matters. But what I would like to also offer is that we had, together with UNESCO, during the UNESCO campaign to eradicate xenophobia and all other forms of discrimination, we developed a training manual or a policy guide for cities to integrate refugees and asylum seekers. And it's a valuable publication. I'm currently updating it, because it deals with human settlements, transport, education, city systems, even the issue of how we can ensure that the city's human resources system can recruit and employ refugees and asylum seekers. So I would offer that, and as a minute of this webinar, to share it with you, so that when we've updated it, because it's a valuable publication, and we can get into the system and share it with other cities, both in South Africa and broadly.
Thank you so very much. We look forward to that publication and hearing about that. Leonard, I'm going to come to you now. What's the significance of this pledge? And do you think that it's going to really help refugees in Durban? If you may unmute, Leonard.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, super. No, thank you very much, and good to hear what Mr. Applegreen has just said. Eric, good to see you. It's been a while since last year when I last saw you, when we came down to Durban. No, it's excellent points that have been raised by both Daniel and Eric. I think the key significance of the pledge made by Durban is the strong message of inclusion and solidarity. The pledge itself underlines the spirit of Ubuntu. We are one and we will do things together and we will share our resources. This has been clearly demonstrated by the residents of the municipality during the COVID-19 pandemic, when refugees and host communities came together and shared the limited resources that they had. You must recall that at the pandemic, especially when the lockdown was declared in March, level 5 lockdown, refugees who mainly work in the informal sector immediately lost their means of livelihood. So but this is quite important to understand that it was the residents themselves who shared the resources and food and life-saving support with each other. And as Eric mentioned and underlined, there were problems with access to social grants. UNHCR stepped in, of course, helped over 35,000 asylum seekers and refugees, including members of the host community. But it really underlined that municipalities and some of UNHCR's are some of UNHCR's most important partners. Indeed, in South Africa and the world over, the majority of the world's refugees, 61%, live in urban areas. Here in South Africa, again, during the pandemic, of the more than 759,000 cases and more than 20,000 deaths, most of the affected live in urban areas, including refugees. And UNHCR has been tracking the impact on refugees and asylum seekers, and we know that 76 persons of concern tested positive, and unfortunately 4 of them died here in South Africa, and all the reports came from the urban areas. So again, that message of that's contained in the pledges, the one-stop shop, the going there, talking about the problems that refugees face, providing refugees such as Daniel a platform to interact with the leadership of the municipality is very important. And one of the pledges that I'm really quite impressed with that the Durban municipality made is that of creating a one-stop shop for asylum seekers and refugees so that they can have immediate access to decision makers. The Global Compact on Refugees, adopted in 2018, recognizes the important role of local authorities as frontline actors and the opportunities that engagement with city networks provide. The humanitarian field is at the forefront of witnessing the most important shift from rural to urban world. Refugees, as I said, increasingly are living in urban areas or in settlements that will soon become urbanized, that it's important to provide durable services, putting in place health, water and sanitation facilities that would not only serve the host community, but also the refugee community. And that's what is at the center of the Global Compact on Refugees, that both humanitarian and development resources, the funds that are allocated either by the international community or by the national treasury, actually are planned and delivered in an inclusive way, and that nobody is marginalized or excluded from public services and national systems that provide these services. So I think the strength of the GRF pledge committed by the city shows the commitment in the municipality to continue including refugees in developmental programs and to integrate migrants and refugees fully in the city system. As the law provides for full integration of refugees, asylum seekers, immediately you arrive and register as an asylum seeker in South Africa, and you receive what they call a Section 22 permit, you are included in the social services. So this is one of the vanguard positions, policy positions that the Republic of South Africa has taken, and we commend government and the people of South Africa for being so magnanimous across all provinces of South Africa. This is the case. There are glitches here and there with regard to people who may not have the permit on time or have expired permits, who may have difficulties accessing services, but the law, the legal framework is very clear, and it's based on the premise of inclusion. So we are very hopeful that these great efforts will go a long way towards improving and maintaining the protection space for refugees and asylum seekers in Durban. And also pass on and underline the message of inclusion. And this message of inclusion by in of itself will combat misinformation and also some of the challenges that foreigners face with regard to employment opportunities and their safety and security. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Leonard. Eric, I'm going to come to you right now. There is a question from Martin Mande, who says, can I find out from Eric if the city has any bylaws on integration on refugees? I know that we've touched a little bit on policy, but Eric, maybe if you can expand a little bit on that?
Just to say no, the city does not have any bylaws. And I think the national law kind of applies. In terms of what Leonard was saying, that the documentation that refugees and asylum seekers have entitles them to operate in the informal and the formal economy and to be employed. But yeah. However, I do think that in terms of our pledge, that we need to find innovative ways of how we ensure that our municipal trading license bylaw environment becomes inclusive and also is not abused by people, and that refugees and asylum seekers have equal access to trading permits, and that is properly managed. And I see from the comments that people are still feeling insecure, particularly at the workshop complex. And I think that needs to be investigated quite soon to ensure that everyone, see, and I think what's been happening is that a lot of the trading license environment has been subject to abuse and corruption. So the city is trying to regularize or ensure that all the traders in that market have the necessary documentation to allow them to trade, and particularly if they're trading in food, that there's the bylaws on food integrity and safety. The clothing that's sold there is not contraband goods, because that compromises us as a city with the commercial houses. And then also the permit holder has to be the person trading on site. And there has been situations where South African who own trading sites have been subletting it to foreign nationals and have been abusing foreign nationals in that instance and not doing what they should be doing. But I think what I'm saying is that part of our engagement with the leadership of the migrant communities is how do we work together to ensure that people have equal access to trading licenses within the municipal environment.
Certainly, thank you so very much for that. I'm sure that our guest is answered enough. Fatima, I want to come to you now. We know that refugees throughout the world during this pandemic have played a very crucial role in helping cities, be it delivering food or working as essential workers in different types of cities. Can you just tell us a little bit more about the USCLG and their call to action, and if there are any plans to support more cities ahead of the GRF in 2023 to make more pledges?
Sure, well, thanks a lot, and thanks for having us today. I am particularly happy to be here because most of this pledge comes directly from the launching of the call to action that UCLG made together with the Major Migration Council and the International Organization for Migration at the last UCLG World Congress that took place in Etequini, organized by our colleagues of SALGA that I'm aware that have joined today this call, and I very much hope that we will be able to hear from them later. So I just want to put a little bit of a broader framework to this action from Durban by explaining that the pledge that Durban did falls within this call to action, which is a collective effort from our network together with these other partners to help to achieve the commitments that local governments did 2 years ago when the Global Compact for Migration and the Global Compact for Refugees were being endorsed by the international community. There we saw that the international community acknowledged the role of local governments as frontliners, but this doesn't mean necessarily that they recognized also that these responsibilities, which is not just a role, but it's a responsibility that local governments bear, should be supported with due financial resources and mandates. So, but at that time, local governments were already gathered and organized in the Mayoral Forum for Migration and Development, back to back with the Global Forum for Migration and Development, which is an informal process of dialogue among states that informed the Global Compacts as well. In that occasion, mayors from all over the world, around 60 mayors, signed the Marrakesh Declaration. In that declaration, they recognized their willingness to endorse the Global Compacts at unison, because from the territorial perspective, from the local perspective, there are some frontiers between migrants and refugees that are blurred because they are all neighbors. They all need access to basic services. Their inclusion is not only has not only an impact on their own stories as persons, but also on the story of the whole community. So you cannot govern a community without having responses for those that arrive. In this sense, what we try to promote at the United Cities and Local Governments are exchanges of practices, exchanges of experiences among local governments on how to best manage this situation without having yet the capacity to do so at the extent they would like to, because they lack those mandates and resources. And another thing that is a key aspect of our global advocacy that we do with our members, and that has already been mentioned, is a change in the narrative. And we do think that local governments are very instrumental in this, because for local governments, it's not border-centered approach what would define what is a migrant or a refugee. It is more people-centered, the approach promoted by governments. And we do think that by fostering inclusion and solutions based in communities, local governments do promote a change in narrative that could reduce that conflict that Eric was just mentioning, or that Leonard was speaking to. So that is the overall framework, and I hope this answers to your question.
Definitely it does. I'm going to come back to you a little bit later on, Fatima. I just want to go back to Leonard a little bit. There's a question here from Johannes Bell who says, the UNHCR is a powerful organization. Unfortunately, it is more reactive than proactive to refugee problems in Africa. What is the organization doing to address the root causes of these forced migrations at a point of origin? Do you have any answer or words of encouragement about the UNHCR's work towards this?
Yes, thank you very let me see.
We can hear you, Leonard.
Okay, very good. Yes, thank you very much for that question. UNHCR supports the efforts of governments and the member states of the United Nations to protect, assist, and find solutions to the plight of refugees. It's an organization that deals with people who are affected by conflict, violence, and persecution. So in that sense, I would agree with the person that we are reactive in because we do react to the facts on the ground. If people are put in harm's way and they flee their countries of origin and arrive in a place of safety and are provided asylum, we will support that. Of course, the whole United Nations system is there to maintain international peace and security and promote human rights, and UNHCR is in the human rights area, the socio-economic area, where we act in a political way. We react to a humanitarian situation and provide life-saving assistance. So, but of course, the other parts of the United Nations are there to promote international peace and security, react to situations that present a threat to that peace and security. And they are also charged with prevention work directly. We also work in a way to also promote that prevention work by working on conditions that would be conducive for people to return to their countries of origin. But we all have different parts and roles and responsibilities within the United Nations. And there is a part of the United Nations that's directly seized with the prevention of conflict. But ultimately, it's the political will, it's the people themselves in these countries and their leadership that have to promote peace and security in their countries, promote human rights and good governance so that refugees do not flee or cause a situation where internal displacement occurs, or if you have a situation of natural disaster, are able to provide assistance so people can reconstruct and build back better. So in a sense, it's a lot of moving parts. We play a role in a certain way, but also other actors and other have responsibilities. And ultimately, it's the people themselves that have got responsibilities in their countries to hold their leadership accountable to ensure that human rights are respected, and also the neighbors of countries where we have this particular problem to come, like here in Southern Africa, SADC has got a role. The Southern African Development Community has got a role to maintain and promote peace and security in the neighborhood. So it's a complex question, but I hope I've been able to respond to the key parts of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's all about collaborations and each body doing what it's supposed to be doing, including the citizens of the countries and refugees from wherever they are. Indeed, I think it's important to note that with the people on this call right now, there's a lot of people who are refugees who've experienced firsthand what it is to be a refugee in this country. I'll read one message here from Solange Mukamana. She says, I arrived in South Africa in 1997, long enough to understand what it means to be rejected and live outside a system. There is no population that is ungovernable, but political will is not being applied positively. I think that's food for thought here, because 1997, she's been here almost as long as South Africa has been independent, and for her to still feel like that still shows that there's a long way to go in understanding the narrative of the African refugee. Daniel, I'll come back to you now, because you're also a refugee and have experienced what Solange has probably experienced. How do you see those collaborations that Leonard also just touched on now, working between different organizations and the civil society to ensure that there is really progressive inclusivity in the city of eThekwini? Daniel, don't forget to unmute.
Thank you very much. There's really a great need of civil society organization working together in partnership, but also to work together with the city. My take on working together, I will appeal that the cities at the present moment, the city of Durban has no formal policy framework that address migration and inclusion in the city. So the city, we will appeal that the city have to have a formal policy framework within the city, which will be able to address migration and inclusion. But also the civil society organizations, they are working in silos, and they're becoming a very challenging situation to address the issue of inclusion while people are working in silos. So we need to come together and address this together as civil society organization together with the government. Thank you.
Certainly, Daniel. Thank you so very much for that. I would like to encourage people to send more of their questions through. We'll go through as many questions as we can. The aim of this conversation is to make sure that this partnership really works, and that what the city of eThekwini is trying to do can really work, and you get answers to the questions that you may have. Leonard, I'll come back to you now. How can these partnerships that we're now all talking about with organizations such as SALGA and UCLG help in building relationships with cities that result in better outcomes for refugees and the hosting communities themselves? Don't forget to unmute, Leonard.
Yes, I have to find the button. Thank you very much. United Cities and Local Governments of Africa is the umbrella organization for African local governments, and was founded in 2005 in the city of Tshwane, in the municipality of Tshwane here in South Africa. So UNHCR sees the umbrella organizations both at the regional level, global level, regional level, and at the national level as key strategic allies to reach cities around the country and also in the world, and realize the Global Refugee Forum pledge that has been made by the cities that Valentin in his introductory message underlined. So a pledge of whole of society approach is also very strong, and it enhances the rights of refugees, and established as the African section of the World Organization. Africa now boasts a membership of about 44 national associations of local governments from the regions, as well as 2,000 cities that have more than 100,000 inhabitants. So local municipalities can really bring the important outcomes we are looking for of the inclusion, participation, feeling part of the whole for refugees in the host communities where they live. So with this partnership, I think it's really important for us to realize that the outcomes we are looking for have to be based on mutual understanding of the needs of the refugees and the host communities, and inclusive policy framework, enabling legal environment that already exists in most places, and most importantly, the social cohesion that you find in community where everybody embraces their neighbor and looks out for their neighbor so that you can live in safety and security. And cities are really at the core of this because they have the councillors. The councillors are the grassroots leaders who interact with the people at that level. They are even closer than the national government. So local government is really key in building the social cohesion blocks that we need to build to make sure that the cities are not only livable, but they are diverse, cosmopolitan, and vibrant, because cities really thrive when people from all corners of the world live and work together. And South Africa has got classic examples of this. The big cities, Johannesburg, Cape Town, Durban, are really these petri dishes of the world, where you see all of this social experiments happening of living together and so on, and also challenges that you see across the globe. They also distill themselves in these cities. So it's important for this message, for this work that we've been talking about, the points that Eric mentioned, the points that Fatima also underlined, are really key to ensuring that we get the right positive outcomes that we need in the cities. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonard. You know, in the chat box of this live right now, a lot of people are talking about different experiences and talking about the police not understanding or lack of their understanding of the policies or what's supposed to happen. There's even a comment here where somebody's saying that people on the ground are even calling for perhaps refugee camps being put in South Africa, since there is no actual camp in South Africa. Fatima, I would like to come to you with this question. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the UCLG's role in peace building and social cohesion? Because clearly the peace for refugees in South Africa is a big thing and a big issue.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think that is a really relevant question, and if I had to give an answer to that fits into this time that I have allocated, I would say that yeah, we can definitely not separate the notion of inclusion from that notion of peace and also the notion of social cohesion. There are many ways in which we address peace, which is also a relevant subject to us, although it is not in many other international settings, and very sadly. We just had participated in the organization of the Mexico Peace Forum in October, and migration was also, and when I speak about migration, let me speak about human mobility for different reasons, and displacement was a really important part of it. I would say that in that unique approach that I was mentioning, that cities and different levels of government have at the subnational level, there's this notion of the importance of fostering the capacity to live together for those that come and go. So for us, providing tools for inclusion entails a whole set of mechanisms. For instance, the one-stop shops, of course, that Eric was mentioning, can help, for instance, reduce situation of uncertainty and informality and undocumentation that can then promote ghettoization of certain groups of people and their families, and so on and so forth. So this would be one, but another one would be public space, promoting safe public space for everyone. Another one would be being able to, for instance, provide protection duly to children and minors, so that they grow up in environments that help them be included in the places where they arrive. all of that and tackling local development, tackling informality, tackling access to services in a coherent and structured manner is then the gateway to peace. Because if, and we were listening just about that from Eric, when people feels that there are competing interests among the newcomers and the locals. Many times this happens also connected to issues of governance, of corruption that may then foster certain images among among groups of people and about certain groups of people. And in this, I would come to the narrative on migration and on this need to overcome this us versus them narrative, and also to overcome this like defining using certain labels in certain ways. And this is for us also a part of what we're discussing now about peace. So I would wrap up by saying that again, by through two main tools, which are capacity building, which is related to knowledge exchange among cities, and advocacy, we do try to first of all help a new narrative that stops seeing migration as a challenge, because it's not. It's a really natural phenomenon, whatever the reasons are and wherever the legal status of the person. So displacement is a natural phenomenon, and the strange thing is the opposite. It's not to move. So not looking at this as a challenge maybe could help also not to see interests of groups of people as being conflicting, and then promoting a more peaceful environment. So it is an integral work that comprises a lot of different dimensions.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you so much for that, Fatima. Eric, you've had your hand up for a while. I'll give you this platform now. You may unmute.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Yeah, just a few points. Yesterday I participated in the Global Parliament of Mayors, and I think cities are at the forefront of serving people, whether they migrants, and I think cities. And going back to Leonard's point, I think cities have now started to say, how can we use our multilateral platforms like UCLG, Global Parliament of Mayors, our organized local government, and how do we build the capacity of cities to have a stronger voice in the UN system, and work with the UNHCR to help them to be more proactive? Because what happens is that UNHCR and national governments normally have protocol that they put in place, and I think sometimes the message from cities takes long to get to the national, and I think cities can be more proactive, and I think that is what we're trying to push through the Global Parliament of Mayors and UCLG, that cities have a more better voice in the UN. So, and I really agree with Daniel that we should work on a formal policy framework on integration for cities like Durban and other cities. And I think that the network we've created here is that we should try and mobilize resources to develop. One is to update we'll pay for the update of the UNESCO manual for cities, get the a sharing of knowledge and developing a document that we could share with all the cities to help them develop what we describe as formal policy frameworks on integration and social cohesion. So I think, because actually what will help is what Fatima was saying about the governance in cities. If you have poor governance in cities, the treatment of migrant communities becomes compromised. And I think these tools that Daniel and others have spoken about will help the administration, the security apparatus, and the rules and procedures to ensure inclusion of refugees. So I'm saying, let's develop these tools for knowledge sharing, capacity building, and policy formulation.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. There's a question here that I have for you, Eric, from Matthias Bigiramama, who is part of the KZN Burundian community. He says that a peaceful coexistence between locals and migrants in different countries, and especially in South Africa, is becoming an impossible mission to achieve. What can local government and UNHCR do to change this? Because if there is no change, we are heading for a disaster. Unmute.
Yeah, no, I empathize with what he is saying, but I think it's a bit of an over-dramatization, I think, of the situation. And my direct answer is that we, as a city, what we've got to do is to ensure that we have platforms for dialogue with the recognized community leaders. And I think, and part of that dialogue is, one is to deal with early warning systems, to deal with real conflicts, and to develop proactive engagements and programs and projects where communities find each other. And I think we haven't done enough of that. And I think we've kind of dropped the ball a bit, but we need to strengthen the engagement. And I think what's happened is that even amongst the migrant community leadership, it's very male dominated. And also amongst them, there is conflict and disagreements as to who are the legitimate leaders. And we should try and eliminate that, because that is what's even bedeviling our city leadership system, where when there's conflict amongst the leadership and no purpose, unity of purpose, it is very difficult to have coherent programs that enable solutions faster and quicker. So I do think that we need to work quickly, because also I think one of the other issues for me is that it's a similar thing like with extremism around the world. Like as a Christian, if other Christians are doing things in the names of Christianity that are violence against people that don't subscribe to the Christian values, and I keep quiet about it, I don't know anything about it, I am in a way supporting that violent act. The same with Islam, with Judaism. So any political system that doesn't speak out, it means there is a level of complicity. It's with religion. And so I'm saying we've got to find ways of speaking out and tackling, and because what's happened is that within the refugee community, when there are acts of criminality by Burundian, Rwandan, Nigerian, I mean, in most cases, they are collaborating with South African criminals. But what happens is that the criminal act of the foreign person becomes the big story. And that is not the real story, it's criminality. So we've also got to work with our criminal justice system to ensure that we deal effectively with criminals, whether they're a migrant or a South African.
Yeah. Thank you so very much for that. Daniel, I'm going to throw back to you now. We've spoken about different marches and movements that we've seen happen against foreign nationals. What role do you think social advocates have in making sure that people know about the positive contributions that refugees are making in the country? Daniel?
Thank you. The Social Cohesion Advocate is the project of the National Department of Art and Culture. We have programs, like now we have 5 years program to build social cohesion and nation building in the country. And one of our mandate is to do a lot of dialogue between local and refugees and asylum seekers and migrants in general, so we can build this social cohesion fabric. But at the city level, we are faced with quite a few challenges. One of the challenges at the city level is that there's no connection between the national department and the provincial department. And this creates a lot of challenge in implementing the work of social cohesion advocates. And there's a need of building some connection between the national department and the provincial department and the city as well, to facilitate the social cohesion advocate work to be very easy to do. In terms of the current situation in Durban, there's a meeting of social cohesion advocate today to come up with a framework. How can we intervene as social cohesion advocate? And then we'll take it from there. But also in terms of the cities, Eric, you recall that we met at the Global Parliament of Mayors at ICC, I think it was sometime last year. And all the cities are really keen to do social cohesion in their cities. And also I was at Salga conference in Newcastle. Well, also it was agreed that the ward have to have social cohesion program in the ward level. But also there's a challenge of resources. The cities have good pledge. The Global Parliament of Mayors have good pledge, but where is the resources? Because all the mayors will say we don't have resources. The Global Parliament of Mayors, they don't have resources. So I think when we are talking about addressing the issue of social cohesion and the inclusion, we need also to discuss where is the resources, because you will never do it without resources. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for that, Daniel. Leonard, finally, I'll come to you. Before I ask you that question, I'd like to encourage our guests to send through questions. We are reaching the last few minutes of our conversation. So if you've got a question that you want answered, please send it through quickly, and then we will go through as many as we can with our esteemed panelists. Leonard, why is working together with Durban so important for social cohesion among different groups, particularly for refugees?
The number one message I will start off with is it's important to work with cities, and especially Durban, which is the first city in South Africa that has made this pledge, and also across the continent, is that powerful message that refugees are welcome in this city. I think that's very important. And service delivery in South Africa and in most countries in urban areas is delivered by local government. So you can have all the important national frameworks and legal frameworks at the national level, but as Eric underlined, that they are the ones that operationalize this national intent that is contained in the legislation. They are the ones that will make the administrative rules on how to access services. So it's critical to work with a municipality at all levels. They are so they're at the forefront really of inclusion, education provision, health provision. They are right there up front. So they are the frontline actors. They are key for us to work with. They are the ones, because of their proximity to the host community, the councillors in the wards at the ward level, they are able to interact and pass on this message of social cohesion, of empowerment, of peaceful coexistence. And this will combat misinformation, things like racism and violence in the community, because of course they come from outside the municipality, outside the country. They speak a different language, so there has to be that process of welcome, where people get to learn each other's cultures. People are able to help each other at the grassroots level, and that's where the cities are. So, since refugees are living in the townships and locations that the municipalities work in as well, refugees are in a way quite dependent on municipalities. They have sought protection from the country, and the national level grants them asylum. But the realization of their human rights on a day-to-day basis is dependent on the host community and the municipalities. So it's important to join hands with authorities to work towards peaceful coexistence in refugee hosting communities, so refugees can be sure of the protection they need and deserve, and also share. the part about business licenses, that's really critical. Without a license, you can't operate, you can't trade. Most of our refugees own spaza shops in the communities. These are small tuck shops, if you wish, where people sell provisions, food and beverages, water, and so on to the people around them in the community. So social cohesion is vital to promote economic growth and business development. And ultimately, this depends on the municipality. In a diverse city like Durban, the local government and its representatives play a vital role in bringing people together to promote understanding and goodwill. Above all, cities and their mayors and local governments are the ones delivering on the economic, health, and social objectives of the Global Compact on Refugees. They are the first responders as well in during these COVID-19 pandemic times. They are the ones that are doing the community contact tracing. People, when they are sick, they go to the clinics where they receive the first health aid. So city leadership is needed now more than ever. COVID-19 does not discriminate. For us to be safe, everyone around us has to be safe. For us to be able to practice and implement some of the measures that have been put to us, sanitizing our hands, wearing the mask, you have to be included. Now the vaccine is has been developed. It's now in the final stages of development. And when it's being delivered here to the people, the refugees have to be included in the vaccination program. So the clinics that the cities manage in many areas will be at the forefront of that last mile to when somebody receives the jab in their shoulder. And we would there's no reason, and from a health point of view, why refugees will not be included. So we hope that when this is being delivered, the refugees themselves will be part of the awareness raising campaigns, so that we've got a good coverage for the vaccination, so we can have that a critical mass in the population that will then protect everyone else through the process of vaccination of people. And again, refugees will be part of that. There is no indication that they will be excluded. In fact, the health sector in South Africa at all levels has included refugees from the get-go when the pandemic measures were to fight the pandemic were put in place in March by the national government. And solidarity has been also demonstrated. So I look forward to working with the cities. I look forward to traveling to the other big cities. We are talking at the moment with the city of Johannesburg to have a similar understanding, for them to make the same pledge or even more pledges than the city of Durban. Also, we would like to work with the city of Cape Town and other big centers in South Africa. And my office does not only cover South Africa, it covers 8 other countries: Eswatini, Lesotho, Botswana, Namibia, and the 4 islands. And we hope to take the example, the lessons, the good lessons learned by Durban to these areas. So it's really impactful and a vanguard achievement that Durban has made by making those pledges in December 2019. And we'll see that this will go around to the other cities very soon, and that we will really mobilize from the grassroots up to promote social cohesion and a peaceful coexistence in the communities for the mutual benefit of refugees and host communities. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for that, Leonard. Eric, I've got a question here for you. It says, it's from Martin Mende, who says, how will this pledge be different from other documents, such as strategy for the integration, repatriation, and resettlement of refugees drafted in 2015 by the Department of Home Affairs? And this plan was never implemented by the Suite of Tswane policy on migration, migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees.
Yeah, I mean, my view is that circumstances have changed a lot, and hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, so I really do think that what we should do is to revisit that document. And I mean, the city of Tshwane has had quite a turbulent leadership challenge, particularly since the last 2 years. But I agree that that document in particular should have laid the foundations for a better level of integration we're having today. And I mean, I can't really talk for that city, but I do think that maybe we should revisit that strategy and improve on it as part of the commitments in the pledge that we've made to really ensure to work with people like Daniel and other stakeholders to ensure that we have what I would describe as a comprehensive formal policy framework document for cities in South Africa and around the world to really ensure the integration and social cohesion of migrant communities, to break down the silos. I mean, the reason why I'm also wanting to make sure we commit, because we have now a new district development model that national government wants to implement across South Africa. And I think we will take all these documents and even that 2015 document and include, because Home Affairs is part of the district development model in our city. And we've signed an MOU with them around documentation of babies, the cleaning up of our issues of the deaths, registration of deaths in the city. There's a number of cooperation in Home Affairs, but one in terms of the MOU, we have not documented a clear plan as to how the city can work with Home Affairs to ensure the efficiencies around paperwork that migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers need in order to ensure that their cohesion and integration is more effective.
Thank you so very much for that. Leonard, there's a question here for you from one of our anonymous attendees. He says that the Department of Home Affairs decided not to open refugee centers while the South Africans are open. Do you see this as a violation of our rights, and what do you plan to do about it? I've been in and out of court due to refugees being arrested due to expired permits. Those who lost their jobs due to expired permits are many.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. During the lockdown, the Department of Home Affairs put in a policy where there were permits were being extended. Those that were not expired were being extended until some of these facilities could open, where people could then physically drop in. To my knowledge is that some of these centers are open now. People are able to lodge their applications, renew their permits. If there's any problem with the renewal of permits, there are some oversight bodies in the Department of Home Affairs that can assist people who are having these particular problems. If a person is having difficulties articulating this, we have partners, social protection partners, and legal assistance partners. We have 12 strategic partnerships directly with NGOs in South Africa, where you can go and they can help to facilitate access and processing of your documentation. If that's a problem, my colleagues who man the UNHCR helpline will be able to assist. And feel free, to write to UNHCR, where we can provide you with advice on how this can be resolved. I don't see why anybody should lose their job who has a valid permit because their permit has expired. I know also that refugees and asylum seekers had problems at the banks to keep their accounts open. When some of their ID cards had expired, we reached out to the South Africa Bankers Association, and that was resolved that these accounts, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, will be kept open until people renew their documents. So on your specific case, do reach out to people within the DHA to help you, or with the NGO community to facilitate access if there's any problem. And also UNHCR itself can also help give you advice and also facilitate that process. So don't despair, act. As they say, God helps those who help themselves. So reach out to these entities, and I think your problem will, and other similar problems that people might face, will be resolved. There's no problem out there that cannot be resolved if good explanation is made to the decision makers, and they are there in public service, and they will help you. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for that. I would like to give our panel an opportunity to just give their last words. Please, just 30 seconds each. Fatima, I'll start with you, and then followed by Leonard, and then we will just close off.
Thank you so much. I would just like to finish by affirming that I'm happy to see that there's no further need to insist on the key role of local governments in promoting inclusion. Now, where I see the need is on political willingness, but also capacity building, but also resources, and a lot of dialogue across levels of government, and also partnerships among all the groups of society. And finally, a very strong need to shift the narrative and to stop looking at human mobility and displacement as a challenge. Thanks.
Thank you so very much, Fatima. Leonard?
Thank you very much. I mean, first of all, thank you to all the participants for their questions, and also my fellow panelists for being really fantastic and promoting the notion of solidarity within the cities, and that cities are places of sanctuary for asylum seekers and refugees. I would really encourage other cities to join the city of Durban and make concrete pledges. As one of the participants said, policies are good on paper, yes, but they shouldn't remain there. They should be operationalized. They should be implemented. And I'm glad that one of the pledges that the city of Durban made was that actually the people working in the city will be trained on how to be sensitive and reactive and proactive to the needs of refugees and asylum seekers. I think it also goes without saying, and it must be underlined, that here in South Africa, there are almost 300,000 refugees and asylum seekers, and the vast majority of them living in peace and safety and security. The people of South Africa have welcomed a lot of foreigners with open arms. There are millions of foreigners in the country, and refugees constitute less than 10% of that. And generally, everybody is welcome. If you walk around in the cities of South Africa, you have no problem interacting with the host communities. Here, myself, I'm a foreigner working in South Africa, and I have experienced the welcome and the warmth of the people of South Africa, their generosity, their humility, their hospitality. That has been excellent. And also, government continues to really promote and respect the human rights of refugees and asylum seekers. of all migrants in the country. Even the latest policy that's on the books, the latest laws on the books, in the main, they are very progressive, and they really underline and epitomize South Africa being a very strong advocate of human rights protection in the region and at the global level. So thank you very much, and back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Leonard. Daniel, just 30 seconds. 30 seconds, Daniel.
Thank you. An inclusive city is possible. We need to start from the integration process, awareness raising. There is a special urgent need for a general understanding and awareness about refugees in South Africa. But also we need to have inclusive and systematic planning around the issue of migration and displacement. And lastly, the formal policy framework that address migration and inclusion, they are really needed to build a proper inclusion in the city of Durban. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Eric, last words from you.
Thank you to all the colleagues, and thank you for your professional chair of this program. Just to say that I think we've signed the pledge. Many of us have signed the pledge. I think it's now time for action. And what I'd like to just commit is that in terms of the action plan, all the things I mentioned about the tools that we need to build the capacity of cities to be to have more meaningful social cohesion integration needs to happen. And I give my commitment to participate in those processes, develop the tools, and to work with Daniel and others to develop a proposal to mobilize resources for this process. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I think the panel has really touched on the main point that the city of Durban is pledging that it's going to promote inclusivity for refugees that are living within the city, and they will share also a document so that other cities can also share in their can also try and copy or replicate what the city of Durban is trying to do. We understand that collaboration is the key thing that we need to do. Collaborate with different organizations, and the government especially needs to come into the party to ensure that refugees can be included in this South Africa. Before we close off, I would like to play a 30 seconds. I know we've got a short video. Gonna watch a little video, and then after that, we're going to hear from Mr. Valentin, who's also going to give us his last words, and then we will sign off. Please bear with us. I know that we are running a few minutes behind schedule, but we promise to finish promptly. You can play the video now. Thank you so very much for sharing that video. It's really about encouraging our cities to get involved in ensuring that refugees are included in the economy and they're protected. And now, Mr. Valentin, I'll throw over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ansila. And thank you all for this interesting and useful discussion. I am very much inspired to hear how cities are working for refugees and other vulnerable groups during COVID-19. Now, more than ever, we have to support each other to ensure that everyone is included. This is the Global Compact on Refugees in action. Looking forward to the continued engagement with cities and organizations like UCLG and South African Local Government Association, and the increase in the space for cities to share good practices and innovative approaches in the build-up to the Global Refugee Forum in 2023. I would like to thank Ms. Angara Leng, Executive Director, PHAP, for co-hosting this event. And would like also, on behalf of all of us, to thank Mr. Eric Appelgren and Councillor Justa Sidel, and all the cities and municipalities around the world that prioritize the need of the most vulnerable. I would also like to thank Mr. Daniel Biamungu Dunia for his work to ensure refugees living in South Africa are heard, and for his continued service and commitment. I would like also to take the opportunity to thank all the panelists, Fatima, Eric, Daniel, and Leonard, for their key messages and insight. As we move towards 2021, we have an opportunity to take this lesson forward in our work with a balance of both time-based and also innovative approaches. Last but not least, I would like to thank the interpreters and all colleagues working on organizing this inspiring event. Thank you all, and God bless you.
Thank you so very much for that. This was a really powerful event indeed. With that said, we've come to the end of the event. Please continue the conversation online. We are using the hashtag #SettlesWithRefugees, and reach out to the esteemed panel should you have any more questions. And we hope that this conversation was fruitful for you. May you have a great afternoon further.
Thank you, Anne Seller. I'd like to thank Valentine as well, and thank you, Anne Seller, for the fantastic work moderating today's session. Really a pleasure to have you with us to help walk us through this very important conversation. So huge thanks to you, Anne Seller, and thank you to everyone else who has been involved in making this event a reality. I'd like to just point out that the recording of today's event and any follow-up material will be available at the link you see now on your screen. Everyone who registered for today's event will also receive a follow-up email once that recording is available, so you can log in to view that and to share it with colleagues. So with that, thank you once again all, and goodbye. This is Anne Lang signing off from Geneva. Take care.
Thank you, and enjoy your weekend.